Do you have a hard time getting your right foot to play the bass drum smoothly and in time? Thankfully, you can actually overcome this and play more in time and with less effort when you use this somewhat controversial technique. You can do this. Hey, welcome to the Non-Glamorous Drummer. I'm so glad you're hanging out with me today. I help beginner and intermediate drummers become the musicians others want to play with and have in their band because of how well they nail songs. And this is all thanks to learning the non-glamorous core skills that actually help you make faster progress in the practice room. And hey, speaking of faster progress, and especially if you are here as a beginner, I have a free gift for you that I think is going to help you out a lot. How would you like to be able to play the ideas you hear in your head without feeling like your brain is running out of bandwidth, without fearing train wreck or brain fart where you just freeze up? Imagine being able to just hear an idea, hear a groove, hear a fill, and play it. Well, in order to do that, you have to have four-way coordination. When you have coordination, everything is more fun and more easy. But without four-way coordination, everything is difficult and you always feel like you don't quite have enough mental CPU. But hey, I have a special guide for you that is going to help you break down these coordination barriers. It is my 30 days to four-way rock coordination for the beginner drummer free PDF e-guide. This is just a 14-page PDF guide, and it's incredible how it's helped out so many drummers. It's so simple, but it's helped out so many drummers where as they get to like day 10, 11, 12, they start seeing incredible transformation with their playing. You got to get past that sophomore slump, but it's so worth it. So I say that as an encouragement. When you get started in this guide, work through the first few days, make sure you give it till day 10, 12, 15, you'll start to get crazy results. It's okay if it takes longer than 30 days to work through it, by the way. The point is that this is 30 step-by-step lessons, playing fun musical grooves you'll use in songs that push your coordination and just break down all those mental barriers, opening you up to incredible potential on the drums. I think you'll have a lot of fun with this. So go grab that. It's in the description below. Here's the funny thing about our kick drum technique, and I speak for myself as well as for so many students that I've watched. We tend to play our kick drum stiffly, and yet we wonder why it's sloppy. So you know how with hands, with grip, it's all about loose grip. How can we grip loosely and make sure we've got a free rebound? How can we keep the sticks in motion? The more free and relaxed and in motion our sticks are, the better our time is. But yet we don't really take that concept and apply it to the right foot. Specifically, what I mean and what I'm calling out here are drummers that are playing without much beater angle and they're burying the beater. So everything they play looks like where everything is choked up and everything is tense and everything is tight. That leads to problems. It leads to a lack of fluidity and a struggle to play loudly and smoothly and in time. What we want to do is actually establish smooth beater motions so that we're able to play more fluidly and in time without having to try so hard. And that's what's really cool here. Where we're going with this is that we want to not bury the beater. And that's why this is kind of controversial. I know I always ruffle feathers in talking about this, but I'm gonna explain why. We want to not bury the beater unless you have a really good reason. We'll talk about that. And instead establish a smooth rebounding motion that creates in-time playing without you trying so hard. So I'm also preaching to myself here. I want you to know that I've been there with burying the beater. This is what I did for years. I felt like I could play more in time and more controlled and more loudly if I buried the beater. Now, the interesting thing, so in the previous lesson here in this series, we talked about giving your leg space, sitting higher and further back than you think you might need to sit so that you've got more space. The important thing here as we get into this technique and this motion is making sure that you're positioning your foot on the pedal so that you have enough space to create this beater bounce. My problem, I told you in that previous lesson, I was sitting too close. So if you're sitting too close, your foot's gonna end up running up the pedal and you're gonna end up only being able to bury the beater. If your foot's way up here and you're sitting close to the drum, you're only gonna be able to play into it. Just like if you're sitting here hunched over your kit, you're gonna have a hard time playing off of your drums. You're gonna be burying into the drums and wearing yourself out. Versus if you've got some space, you can play off of the drums. Playing off of the drums is the key to dynamics, fluidity, musicality, and sounding better without trying so hard. And the same thing totally applies with our right foot down here. We want to give ourselves more space. So we learned that in the last lesson to sit further back or sit higher. The sitting higher is especially true if you're playing heel up. That way you've got all the space you need. That way your foot can be positioned like this where you've got a good 2 to 3 inches between the end of your shoe and the chain. You want to have that space, otherwise you can't establish this motion. Another prerequisite, we're not going into the nitty-gritty of this today, but make sure you've got your beater angle adjusted to at least 45 degrees so that at rest, your pedal looks like that. You could even go a little bit further than that if you want to, but definitely no less. If your pedal looks like this, you need to adjust your beater to be further back. Sometimes the pushback on this is, well, Stephen, if I adjust it further back, then while I'm playing like this, the beater is going to hit my foot. Well, the only way your beater is going to hit your foot, look at this. If I pull it way back to here where it hits my foot, I'm having to allow the foot plate to go that high. If I keep my foot in contact with the foot plate, the beater cannot come back far enough to hit my foot, right? And so that's another, I guess you could say, core principle here, that we're making sure that our foot stays in contact with the foot plate. We're never leaving the foot plate when we play. In the same way, you don't let go of your sticks while you play. You keep a hand on the stick, you keep that fulcrum in place. We're keeping our foot in contact with the foot plate. That way we have total control, even while using physics here and using this natural spring and rebound driven beater motion. And so that way, even with a lot of beater angle, it's not slamming into our foot. We might occasionally feel it barely brush the top of our shoe, but it's not gonna hurt our foot. It's gonna be totally fine. So give yourself enough beater angle, position your foot like this. This applies to heel down or heel up. Does not matter. Everything we're talking about here works regardless of heel up or heel down. You can do the technique you want to do based on what is comfortable to you. No one is better than the other. So I was at a place in my playing where I was scooting way too far up the foot plate and bearing the beater, and I was running into knee pain like I told you in that other lesson. So my knee was hurting, my leg was hurting, and I was exhausted by the end of a 4-hour cover gig, until somehow I got smart at some point and realized, you know what, maybe I'm doing something wrong if I'm tearing up my shoes and my shoes are sliding into the chain and I'm getting done with a gig and the chain is almost worn through the shoe to my toes. You'd think that this would have been obvious to me, before then. But I was tearing up shoes. Seriously, I was destroying shoes years ago. And so I realized, you know what, maybe if I just sit further back, then I can keep my foot further back. That way my foot doesn't slide up the pedal. That way, instead of playing forward on the pedal, I can play more down onto the pedal, which propels the beater forward, and I can get more motion. Furthermore, what if I bounce the beater? I think I heard, it's hard to remember for sure, I think I heard Dave Elitch, LA drummer, talking about this. He's sort of a teacher of, he's sort of like a coach and teacher and somebody who helps out a lot of the high tier elite drummers of LA. A lot of really great drummers will go and have Dave Elitch watch them play, and he'll say, oh, interesting you're doing that. What if you change this? And just kind of evaluate. Anyways, I heard Dave Elitch talking about this one time and about how when you bounce the beater, it's a more fluid, comfortable motion for your leg, for your foot, and you get a better sound. And so that inspired me, and I tried it, and I never went back. So I want you to do the same. I want you to bounce your beater and get this nice fluid motion happening. And that pretty much leads us straight into our step 1. Time to take action on this. So I've got really just 2 main action steps for you here as we get into the nitty-gritty here. I want you to find your pedal's natural tempo. You may have heard me talk about this before. This is kind of cool. All you got to do is pull your beater back and then let go of it. And pay attention to how fast it bobs. Gung, 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 gung. Do it again. Usually somewhere between 100 and 120 eighth notes. We're counting those as eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and probably closer to 100. That's probably about 105 or so. I don't know. I don't have my metronome out. But okay, find your pedal's natural tempo. You don't have to clock it to the exact, but get a rough feel for what that tempo is. And by the way, if you do this and it comes to rest very quickly and it just stops, that probably means you need to oil up your pedal. And that's actually going to help you out. If you add some oil to the moving part, some dry lubricant specifically, not WD-40, but put a dry lubricant on the moving parts of your pedal, that'll help smoothen it out. You'll be able to get this going on. I've got other lessons on pedal adjustment. I'll link those below if you want to check those out, and just optimizing your pedal so that this is all easier. That might be a place you need to go after you get through today's lesson. But do that beater bob, figure out what tempo that's going at, and then put your foot on the pedal and practice bouncing the beater at that tempo or slightly faster. Sometimes a little bit faster is an easier starting point. So for my pedal, probably about 115. Gung, 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 gung. I'm just bouncing it, not even touching the head. What's important here, in order to do this, you've got to have your foot positioned where you have space. If you're up here, this doesn't work. You could do it way back here, actually. And if you want to try it, you can, but I recommend probably about right here. 3 to 4 inches. Tip of your toes or shoe is about 3 to 4 inches away from the chain. You've got your heel on the heel plate. I'm a size 11.5, pretty average shoe size. If your foot's smaller, then of course, you're going to position your heel differently. If your foot's bigger, your heel might be close to the floor. That's fine. But practice bouncing the beater like this silently, then allow it to start hitting the head just as softly as possible. It might miss a few notes, so it's just barely touching the head. And gradually get louder. And gradually get softer again. And go back to ghosting. Now, probably you're going to notice a few things. One is that your leg starts to get tired. Yes, this is work. Yes, it's a natural fluid motion, but your foot very much has to keep that motion going. And so you're going to find you're feeling the burn down here. You're feeling the burn up here. That is totally normal. Hopefully there is no pain in any joints. If there is joint pain, okay, stop, consult your doctor. I don't want to tell you to keep going if you're suffering from any real pain here. But if it's just burn, if you're feeling the muscles getting tired, okay, that's normal. Pause, stop, shake it off, do some stretching, whatever you want to do. And know that you're going to be building up some strength as you do this more and more, because significant beater motion and speed and volume, it does require strength. We can't just sugarcoat it and say there's a couple of quick hacks that'll give you automatic speed and volume. You've got to build the strength if you haven't done that already. And so you're going to notice that as you're doing this beater bounce, you're actually getting a workout here on your leg and all parts of it. Now we'll take this just a step further. Really this whole thing is just one big action step of doing this whole bouncing thing. But really our part 2, our action step 2. Continue doing the same thing, but actually try doing it a little bit slower and then a little bit faster. So I'm going to pull my metronome out here just so that we can reference exactly what tempos we're at. So I told you 115 was about my guess. Yeah, roughly 115. Yeah, that's about where my pedal wants to go when I'm doing this. It's the easiest tempo to do this at. That's what I want you to find. What is the easiest tempo to bounce eighth notes? And start there. So let's say it's 115. Now, try doing this 15 beats a minute slower. So for me, that's at 100. Here's 100. It feels a little bit weird. It feels a little bit awkward, right? But try doing the same thing at 100, going softly and then getting louder. By the way, you might have just seen me scoop my foot. So as I'm playing, this happens all the time. As I'm playing, my foot sometimes will slide a little bit. Sometimes it'll want to move. This is a constant process of readjusting. I played under a band director in college who always told the woodwinds and the brass that tuning is a process and not an event. You have to always be paying attention to the tuning of your instrument and making sure you're playing in tune. This is the same kind of thing where foot placement and proper technique is a process and not an event. You don't just put your foot in place and assume it's going to stay there. Funny things happen. So it's a process. Always be paying attention to where is my heel, where is my foot, do I need to adjust? Practice making those adjustments on the fly. Know that that is just the way this is. It's the way it works. Okay, so we've got 100. Practice doing this at 100. Just ghosting and then gradually softer and then louder and then back down just like we did at 115. And then go faster toward the other end of the spectrum. Here's 130. Now, as we're going faster, and especially if we're ghosting, that might mean a slight narrower beater motion. We're not letting it come back as far. And so on. As you get louder, you'll find you do use that full beater motion. When you're ghosting or going softer, you can have a slight less motion where maybe the beater comes back to here instead of all the way back to here. So we've got this 30 BPM range, and so that's what we want to do. We want to get comfortable at playing at any dynamic, playing eighth notes within this 30 beats per minute range. This is powerful because we're building leg strength, we're building foot strength, we're building agility, we're building control. All these awesome things, we're basically getting really good at playing kick singles. And what does that do? If we get good at playing kick singles, now we can play kick doubles. We can play anything else we want to play flawlessly and effortlessly when we've mastered our singles. This is so key, so important. A couple other things I want you to be aware of as we wrap up. So what you'll notice as you go even slower, because you can continue to widen this range. So we went 15 BPM slower, 15 BPM faster. You can continue to widen the range as we go slower. So 100, here's 90. It starts to get very awkward to do the ghosting motion at 90. It's just very slow. Now when we get to 80, it kind of gets even more awkward. Look at what happens here. Watch what the beater's doing. See how it's actually doing two motions? It's actually doing a hit and then like a ghost bounce, and then a hit and a ghost bounce. Because we're now going so slow that the beater wants to bounce twice as fast. Let's bump back up to 90 and see if it does this at all. Interesting, 90 is kind of that hybrid point where you can see it's one motion at 90, but it has to slow down a little bit midway, otherwise we'd rush. The beater has to slow down about right here. It almost pauses when we get down to 85. That's where you start to see a distinct pause, and then by the time we're down here at 80, then we start to see that extra bounce, especially as we drop down to 75. And slower from there. Here's 70. So I want you to be aware of that, because when you go faster with this, when you're going faster, it's pretty smooth and naturally fluid. As you go slower, I want you to know this is what you're going to run into. 90, 85, 80, the whole motion starts to change, and we start to get that extra ghost bounce. But that is totally normal. When you're playing these slow eighth notes at 70, the pedal's going to want to keep moving, and that's totally fine. That's going to actually help you with the smoothness here and with the fluidity here as you're working on this. But stay patient with this. Even if this feels mind-numbing to you, be patient with this. This is going to have huge payoffs, because if you master your smooth kick drum singles at this huge tempo range at every dynamic, this is tremendous, because this means you can then go and do anything. It all starts with singles, just like with the hands. It all starts with grip and singles. It all starts with foot placement and singles and motion. We already established how we're going to sit, so we've already got that working for us. You are in an awesome place at this point. So hey, before we go, I want to know from you in the comments, what have you done in the past, buried or bounced, and why? And I say past because today might be your day to change. If you've been burying, maybe I've convinced you to bounce, because it's going to help you out a bunch. I did mention earlier, don't bury unless you have a really good reason. So a potential really good reason for burying might be that you're doing a very dead kick sound, like you've taken off the front head of your kick drum and you've got a bunch of muffling in there, and you're playing fairly softly and you just want a very kind of sound. With this drum, the way I have it tuned, I think it's actually playing two notes. There's a little bit of a flutter happening when I bury, because it's going to-doom, to-doom very quickly, and that's because I have it tuned fairly high. I've got two heads on there, but when you take off the front head, the kick drum takes on a deader feel. Plus, if you tune it low, you've got a lot of muffling, then it might actually feel natural to just go like that. Now, so a potential good reason is when you want that dead sound, you're just playing something very simple and probably not too loud and not too fast, and you just want to play. But know that that's going to put some strain on your leg, so I still don't think it's a great reason. The other potentially good reason is if you're just playing really loud and you just want to leg stomp it. Super loud slow 4 on the floor would be an example of that. And so that might be a potential good reason, but I still don't endorse any of those, because you can get just as much volume as you need bouncing and a better sound. I just don't think burying makes sense. In the same way, we're not going to bury our sticks in the toms or even in the snare. It just doesn't make sense. So I say that just to address that point. Some drummers do it. A lot of drummers do it, actually. But I'm with Dave Elich on this. I think it makes a lot more sense to bounce, and I encourage you to do the same. So maybe I've changed your mind today, but either way, tell me in the comments, what have you done in the past, buried or bounced, and why? But hey, if you've stuck with me at this point, this was part 2 of this whole lesson on kick drum training. We're going to part 3, our final part, in the next lesson, where I'll share with you the better way to really build right foot speed. And it's going to be a lot of fun, because we're going to apply everything we've learned thus far, and you'll see the sky's the limit with where we can go with this. We're going to work on coordinating the right foot with our hands and increasing speed with our kick doubles. It's going to be a lot of fun. So hope this has been helpful so far. I will see you there. Know that you can do this. As always, be encouraged. Go take action. You can accomplish this and master your right foot to play any kick drum pattern you want it to. Stay non-glamorous. I'll see you in the next lesson.